Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam, and I'm about to start the show. I just want to tell you real quick about my best-selling book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It'll help you understand how attackers look at you, how they target you, how they pick out your vulnerabilities and the avenues of approach, and how they determine who, why, when, where, and how they're going to attack. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's not just a lesson plan. It's also got some cool stories in there. You'll like it. It's changed a lot of people's lives, and I promise you will not look at the world the same way after you read it. But if you do want to get in the weeds a little bit more and actually apply what you learn in Sheep No More, well, there's 2 workbooks. The first book, workbook number 1, shows you how to apply what you've learned from the attacker's perspective and do a threat assessment on your life, your home, your school, that if you go to school or you're a principal or a church, whatever, it'll help you look at it from the attacker's point of view and actually apply that. You literally can do the threat assessment, and then you take that information and you use it to build your defenses in workbook number 2. So you have Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. That's where you understand and get the understanding of the basic skills of attack and defend, and then you apply those in threat assessment and defense assessment workbooks. It's incredible. There's nothing else out there like it. Go check it out wherever books are sold. And if you want to get something for the children to teach them, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. It's a book of pictures. It has lessons in it. And you, the parent or the teacher, guardian, go to teamlittlebigs.com and you get the lesson plans. Great for children 2 through 8 and for learning disabled children. It's amazing what they can learn from the pictures when you're teaching them from the lesson plans. Go get them all, and let's start the show.
The truth has arrived.
My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. And welcome back to the show. It is great to be with you. I have been off for about a week. I hosted 2 shows on Sirius last week for David Webb, and back now, and took Monday off for some strange reason. I'm not sure why. I thought I had things to do, but it didn't turn out that way. You know how those days are. You think it's going to be real busy, and it just doesn't pan out. And then other days when you think, oh, I'm going to relax today, and it just goes crazy. And that's kind of the way it was. But, you know, it was interesting. Last week when I hosted on Sirius was the first time I've hosted on there in about a year. And I have to be honest with you, the first day that I hosted, it was great being back in the saddle. I talked about a lot of the things I've been talking about on this show. And then the Colorado shooting had occurred. And of course the gun debate went crazy, as it always does. And I really felt the need that we really seriously needed to talk about this and get the facts straight and point out the reality of what I've been screaming about over the past 6, 7, 8 years about communism and about how they're trying to grab these guns and the reality of all this. I had this big Twitter argument 2 weeks ago with Billy Baldwin, of all people, and he's a far leftist. And the things that these people say just don't make sense. They just don't make sense. They do not have a solution to any problem. And so what was interesting when I was doing the second show, I think that was Friday's show, and I was very, it was very nerve-wracking. I'll put it to you that way. It was very nerve-wracking because when I the last time I hosted a year ago, it was just different, right? It was different. And it was probably well over a year ago when I hosted last, because I haven't hosted since COVID got big. So the last time I hosted, it was a little bit different. The cancel culture was there, but it hadn't kicked in quite as profusely as it has since Donald Trump is gone and Joe Biden is in office. I mean, the cancel culture kind of reached a fever pitch, I would say. Last year, I got booted off of Instagram, and Twitter, kept blocking me up through the election as though I'm going to sway the election. And then I was one of the many people who lost. They didn't block me off of Twitter permanently, but I did lose 25,000 followers in about 3 days. They just either deleted those people's accounts or they just blocked them and dropped their followers. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but most of the people I know actually got their accounts removed for no reason whatsoever. So, but now it's a different story. The cancel culture is real. It's big. It's out there. And the American people, by and large, don't do anything about it because they don't know what to do. And, quite frankly, as I've been saying all along, I'd like to say with all due respect, but let's just be honest. The American people are lazy. Conservatives are lazy. They want to go out and rally and pat themselves on the back. But when it really comes to real protests or real rallies, they don't know what to do. The organization of the conservatives in this nation it's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. And so I was on eggshells the entire time Friday. Probably, I got a lot of compliments on the show, but I felt as though it was one of the worst shows I've ever done because it was the second time in my career that I had experienced this stress in radio, because typically with radio, it's kind of like we used to be like a podcast where you could, you didn't have to worry that much about things happening, things occurring if you said the wrong thing, unless you said something really, really bad. But one time I was on Hannity, I was hosting, and I got told that I could not say the word Hitler on Hannity's show. They literally stopped and told me I could not say the word Hitler because I was saying that the way that the Democrats run thing is like Hitler. And when I say like Hitler, I was saying their propaganda is like Hitler. They run things the exact same way. The Democrats run propaganda the exact same way, if not worse, than Hitler. And I was told that I couldn't say that, and I kind of got bitched out a little bit, and I tell the truth, right? I don't make things up. I don't do things for, just for the sake of ratings. I don't do that stuff, and so for me, it was kind of a shock, and so that really didn't happen too bad. I became very aware of it at that point, that if you say the wrong thing, you can be pulled off and not to host again. Or the reason they were worried about it is because if you say things, it's not that it's not true. If you say things that the left deems not correct, it's either offensive to them. They don't care about when stuff's offensive to anybody else, but if it's offensive to them, or if they think that it's wrong, they'll cancel you. They'll go after the sponsors of the show. They'll try to get them to cancel, and that was the fear. But when I was hosting on on David Webb's show on Friday, I could just feel it. Not that anybody said anything to me. Wasn't that anybody said anything to me at all. It's that I could feel it. I could feel that the debate we were having about gun control and about gun violence and the reality of gun violence, which, by and large, the majority of gun violence in this nation happens in the inner city, which is black on black crime. And, one of the things that I wanted to broach the subject of, but I didn't really broach it, was the fact that this ridiculousness of the black inner city community is being in need of these handouts when the communities are completely destroyed. It's not people of other races or other wealth income categories that are forcing young black men to have 20 different daughters with their sons and daughters with 20 different women, leaving them all without a father. I didn't cause that. Nobody I know caused that, except for the people that are choosing to do that. It's a cultural thing. Nobody has caused the gang and drug use to skyrocket and just be completely out of control, and the gun violence out of control in the inner city, which is a black community. No, nobody caused that. Now, I will say that they are constantly told in those communities, and by I say they, anybody that lives in them is told you will never get out of them, right? The system's against you. You know, you're black or you're Latino or you're poor, and there's just no hope. There's no hope you're going to be like that. And so a lot of these young kids believe that. And they never strive to do anything but what the street tells them to do. Because the Democrats who run, they thrive in these places, man. These lower income places thrive. The Democrat Party thrives there. They totally win some of these cities by getting people motivated to vote in the inner cities, and they always vote Democrat. And what they don't get is that the Democrat Party is responsible for all that. So those are things that I really did not feel comfortable talking about on the radio on Friday for fear of being canceled, where I wouldn't host anymore. And again, it's not Sirius's fault. It wasn't anything that anybody said to me there. I can see what's happening. Listen, this podcast, my book, Sheep No More, that I always do the commercial at the beginning of the show, it has zero staying power on Amazon. Now, it wasn't like that for the longest time. That book was always around somewhere between 1,200 and the top 100 on Amazon's bestseller list. Number one in at least two categories. And then I got connected with Sean Hannity because he wrote the foreword for the book, and I was hosting a show. The more I hosted his show, the more it reflected on this, I believe, the status of my book on Amazon, because his name is attached to that. I would host on the show. I would go and look at the reviews, and the reviews would be all these nasty leftist reviews, and then people would like those reviews. Worthless reviews. I didn't tell anybody good or bad or good about the book or truthful about the book. It was just nasty stuff about me hosting for Sean Hannity. And that would coincide with a drop in the ratings. Like a drop in sales. It would skyrocket because I hosted on his show, and it would go up into the top 100, sometimes in the top 20. And the highest I ever got on Amazon's bestseller list was number 11. I almost made it to the top, but got to number 11. But here's the thing. There, at some point in time, when I was hosting Hannity's show a lot, the algorithm on Amazon, something changed in there. And the book and all the books never get promoted on Amazon. Somebody became aware of my books and my name and its association with Hannity, and something changed. Something drastically changed. Now, like when I hosted on the radio last week, it went up to, I don't know, it was 3,000 on the bestseller list. And then within a couple of days, it's back down to 30,000. It'll pop up to, 20,000 or 15,000 every now and then, but it will not hover up that far. It will not stay up there. And I just don't think that it is, I may be off, or maybe I'm not, but I don't think I'm off on this, that they can't, the algorithm is not going to block the number of sales that are happening, right? You're going to see the number of sales. But somehow, and that's because it's being promoted on the radio, or when I'm on Newsmax, it gets promoted on the TV. But Amazon themselves do nothing to promote this book. They do nothing to where it stays on the list, where it grows. It gets when it starts getting a lot of sales, it goes on the bestseller list, and then it pops up in searches. But as soon as that surge goes away from the hit that I took from the show, where I got a lot of these people ordering it, as soon as those orders die down, the book is not promoted at all anywhere on Amazon's page. Now, that's different for other books because I monitor these things. And other books, they have a good day, they go sky high, and then they just stay up there. And it's, if you know the way marketing works, you know that something, unless it's just extreme word of mouth, which when it comes to these types of books, even though my Sheep No More is more of an awareness book than it is tactics. I mean, there's tactics in there, but it really does improve your overall awareness and understanding that, how attackers look at you and that you can do something to battle that. But There's other books that are just boring as crap, and there's only a certain group of people that are going to buy these books, but they somehow stay up there. And what you see is that they're not connected politically, and there is no like, you don't have somebody who wrote a foreword that has a political name, and for somehow maybe they're paying for the advertising, I don't know, but you go search, prepper books or safety and awareness, and those books will always pop up. My book, even on its best day, will not pop up in those searches. You go to Google. Used to be when you Googled me and you Google and you hit the news tab, you would see all the different things that I've been on. I mean, I've been on TV well over 1,000 times, and hosted probably close to 1,000 radio shows, and some of the biggest radio shows in the nation. Done speech after speech where it's been brought up and written multiple articles and op-eds have been picked up by some of the biggest online publications that there are. FoxNews.com, The Hill. No, I've never in The Hill. I was in Daily Caller. That's what it was. The Daily Caller, the Gateway Pundit. Those things, you may not even find any of it. Some of it's on there when you Google my name, but when you hit news, there's just a couple things come up there, and the rest of that stuff is gone off of Google. I've went through all of it, can't see any of it. So I know the reality of being canceled, and that played a huge part in Friday's show, because I was having to tiptoe around something that's very important, not saying anything that is outside of the lane of truth, but it was nerve-wracking. And anybody that knows me and listens to these shows and programs where I host, I have a pretty good flow because I'm very confident about what I'm talking about. But when it came to that show on Friday, man, I don't know what it was, but I could feel it. But today's show, what I wanted to cover, besides giving you the information about the reality of this cancel culture, I mean, that's gotten pretty ridiculous, but really the most ridiculous thing is, and I feel a lot freer doing this show here, and who knows, this show could be taken down. That's why I'm working with somebody about a podcast platform. We'll see what happens as far as that goes. There's a lot of platforms out there, but they're very liberal. You can always go now to Jonathan T. Gilliam, by the way, and I will post my show up there. Right now I have SoundCloud is what I pull and put up there, because not everybody has an iPhone. So you can, even if you have an iPhone or an Android, you can listen to it from my website. But here's the interesting thing, is that I don't feel pressure doing my own podcast. I'm going to tell the truth like I see it. And what's happening right now, I know I'm not saying anything that you all don't know, but the reality of the left and this, it's gotten so ridiculous now. It's hard to even take it, it's hard to even take it seriously. I found a couple of the Mr. Potato Heads that were out there still on some shelves. Bought those. Hopefully there'll be collector's item someday. But I was walking by one today and I looked over at it and I was like, this is the level of ridiculous. It just popped into my brain. I literally sat there and looked at the package for a minute and thought to myself, this is the level of stupidity that we've gone to in this nation. It's this bad. It's that bad, where an inanimate object that shows people the difference between Mr. and Mrs. is going to be taken off the shelf because of a very small portion of people who are mentally ill, who believe that they were born in the wrong body, that we're going to take these dolls off the shelves that were probably some of the best dolls to ever give kids so they understand the difference between male and female, and we're going to take them off the shelf. That's not the way a republic or we're not even a real democracy, but that's not the way a real democracy would work either. It has gotten to a point now where it's just absolutely ridiculous. It is not equal, because now if you don't feel like the extreme left, it doesn't matter. You're oppressed. So it's reached this epidemic level now where it's almost, I don't know if it can be stopped, because I don't see enough people out there trying to stop this. And it's going to be a point, if we don't do something about it, it's going to get to the point where it's going to be like living in a Saturday Night Live skit. I mean, it already is pretty bad, but it's like a Saturday Night Live nightmare. This thing about how the news can just go on over and over and over and point out every single time a white cop is involved in a shooting or somebody is victimized in a violent attack of some sort by a white man, that it becomes front page news. White man did this, white cop did that. But yet the bulk of shootings that are go on a daily basis, I was in Manhattan last week, gave a speech there, talked to a community organizer that's Chinese. He's in the Asian community. Talked to another incredible guy who's got so much passion, it's unbelievable, who's a Jewish conservative. Used to be a part of Jews for Trump. I met him several times throughout the past couple of years. I talked to both of them. I point blank asked them, in the Asian community, and all these attacks are happening on the Asians, who's doing those attacks? Is it white supremacist skinheads? He's like, no, it's black people. It's the black community. They have a terrible relationship with the black community. The Asian community that rents and does all these things, whether it be in Flushing or in Chinatown and different places around the United States, they have a terrible working relationship with the black community. Fights all the time, disrespect on both sides. It's bad. I asked my good buddy there who used to be with Jews for Trump and is a very conservative Jewish guy. I said, all these attacks that are happening over in Brooklyn against the Jews, is it white supremacists that are doing this? He said, no. No, it's the black community. They do not get along with the Hasidic Jews. They have a terrible relationship because the Hasidic Jews don't want to rent or don't want to the black community, and they don't want black people in their stores. And then it's not just them. They live right next to the inner city, so you get all these thugs that are coming in there robbing. That's why they don't want them in there, because they get robbed. It's not like there's people from Midtown Manhattan or live on the Upper West Side that are going into Brooklyn and robbing them. So, listen, you could say whatever you want. There's people on the left would try to construe this as because I'm white and I shave my head because I have a bald spot on top, not because of any belief in anything. Trust me, if I could have a head of hair, I would. But you could say that this is a racial thing, that I'm a racist or doing that. I'm not. There's not a racist bone in my body. I'm a realist. Okay, I'm a realist. I've been to almost every city in this in the continental United States. I've never been to Alaska or to Hawaii. And every inner city that I go into is black. Most of the gun violence and drug violence and gang violence in every city that I go into is black. Now, that is not caused by oppression. That's caused by a community choice. So, listening to these two guys talk, it reminded me, I told this story before on here, of how I was in Arizona. I'm trying to remember the name of the town that I was in. It was up in the top of Arizona, so it's kind of cold up there. And it was, forgive me, fellas, if I'm getting this wrong, but I think it's Cherokee area. And there was a convention center there and a casino. And I went there for a convention to speak and to sell some books. And in walked this guy while I'm there. Listen, I get starstruck, not usually by movie stars, by things like I've never seen, a Cherokee Indian before, somebody who says that they're Cherokee. Up until that point, it was just amazing for me to think this legendary group of people that I'm amongst them. That to me I get stuttery and awestruck from that. And in walks this guy. I'd been there all day. In walks this guy. He looked like something out of Central Casting. Tall. He was like 6'3", just looked like he looked like the body of a fireman, like, somebody who's been fighting fires for 25 years, thick hands, good build, athletic, squared away jaw. He just looked like what you would picture a warrior Indian to look like. So I started talking to him, and he was a cool dude. His kids were cool. His wife was cool. And I point blank asked him a similar question that I asked my buddies there in Manhattan, the Chinese guy and the Jewish guy that I know. And so I'm talking to this Indian. I said, listen, you look like a badass warrior. You're exactly what I thought I would see when I come amongst a warrior tribe. I said, but I have to be honest with you. I've been here all day. I've eaten in this casino. I've walked around the casino. I've talked to several people that are working here, and it's like talking to people who are high. They look like they're half asleep. Most of them were extremely overweight, and they put out minimal effort in anything they were doing. I mean, anything. Breathing, it was like minimal effort. I talked to my mom, who had done some volunteer work with her church on Indian reservations several years in a row. And she told me that whatever they did, whatever work they went there and did, the next year they came back, that same work would be there. Nobody would ever progress if they didn't come there. And I don't get that. That doesn't compute in my brain. So I told this guy about it, and I said, can you shed some light on why this is? How these communities got here. I said, is it because of what, when they founded America and they started progressing west and all these different locations where Americans set up shop, that they went after the Indians? I said, is it because of that? Is it because of the white man? He says no. He goes, I'll tell you what it is. I tell you why these people are the way they are. It's because they live on the reservation and they take a paycheck from the reservation every month. And because they take that paycheck, that's all they're going to get. They're not going to strive too much harder because it's just enough. It's just enough for them to not survive on, but a little bit more than survive on, right? Just a little bit more than they need to barely live. So I was like, well, explain that. I don't get that. I mean, why would you be, I didn't come from that myself, but I'm like, why would you be comfortable with that? He says, because it's just enough for them not to have to try any harder. And his father, and I wish I would have gotten this guy's name. I don't have his name. He would have been a great guest to have on. He said that his father would never allow them to live on the reservation, because he said the moment you start taking that money, you become a slave to that money. If you move off the reservation, you're not going to get it. If you want to buy a house, you can't get a mortgage for a house on many of these reservations, right? There's no banks there because it's federal land. It's really weird the way the whole laws are, right? But they want to allow outside banks there because they don't want it to be overbuilt or something like that. And then so these people can't get loans for homes. So everything they live in is decrepit. Their energy level is terrible because they don't need to strive. They've become comfortable in what the government gives them, and they just don't try any harder past that. Now, that sounds like a sweeping statement that I'm making there, and I'm trying not to overgeneralize this, but according to this guy who was the epitome of the warrior breed, his father taught him, and he taught his children, never live on the reservation because you will become a slave to that handout. So when I compare and contrast these three stories, okay, or these three different individuals, two stories, but these three individuals, incredible guy that's a community activist and conservative Chinese guy in New York, an incredible conservative Jewish guy in New York, and this warrior breed Indian, I think he was Cherokee from where I was at in Arizona. And you combine their stories and you contrast it to what the Democrats preach on a daily basis and this ridiculousness of where we've gone. What you see is slavery. It's slavery. It's no different than any other type of oppression that leads to people doing what they're told, not asking for more, and assuming that everything that they are told is right because that's the all powerful end all be all. Now it's the government. Whatever the government says, that's what's right, or that's what's truthful. Whatever media says on television, it's got to be the truth. And you're enslaved. You are enslaved because the people in this nation, see, it's very similar to what the guy, the Indian warrior that I talked to, what he was saying about what his dad said. If you live on the reservation, you become a slave to that money. Well, in this nation, we've become a slave to comfort. Conservatives don't want to raise too much of a ruckus because they don't want to lose their freedom. They don't want to risk getting in trouble. They don't want to risk losing their job. They don't want to risk not being able to buy, this or that, or their dog a new bone and leash, or, whatever, the 50,000th dress that they own, or a new car every year. They don't want to risk that, so they don't make a ruckus. Right? They want their money because they work for it. Conservatives, I work for my money. I want my money. But that means that they don't volunteer. They don't, like if you're an attorney, you don't see conservative attorneys volunteering their service for free. You go see the Democrat side, they volunteer that stuff all the time. You know what ends up happening? They end up getting paid somewhere down the line by some other Democrat who's donated money. You don't see that on the conservative side. You see Democrats come up with an idea for a new way to oppress everyone else through a social media platform or something. They'll throw money at that. Try to open up, with ConnectZing, we're looking for investors. But trying to get a conservative to invest in something that is an incredible idea that can make a big difference and give freedom of speech back again, it's unbelievable. Not that they're not going to make money off of it. They're going to make tremendous amount of money off of it. But they don't want to take a risk. They don't want to take any risk whatsoever. Now, they'll go out and bitch and complain like everybody else when it comes to being censored on social media, and then they'll go buy and invest in some company that that they can make they make some money off of, and then it's gone. They become an IPO or they sell the company, but they won't invest in anything that could truly change the nation. Liberals, no problem. They throw money at stuff all day. They waste money on, well, not really wasting it. You think all these people being bussed through South America is just something that happens? No. Those buses, those Biden T-shirts, all that crap that will work its way up into the into the millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars. I guarantee it. Just so they can put pressure on the border. Democrats throw money at that all day long. Conservatives would never pay for one bus to get people to a Capitol building to yell and scream at Cuomo, to get him out of office finally and arrested. They would never do that. The Democrats get behind an idea, they stick with it. Conservatives, they bitch and complain about who's right. So we've become a slave to worry. We've become a slave to what we have. And it goes right back to that story. I'm looking at this guy, I'm like, the amount of money they're paying and the lifestyle they live, it's horrible. They could go work somewhere else part-time and have a better life. He's like, they're slave to the money. They don't have to do anything. They do as little as possible, and they get that paycheck. And that's this nation. That's the conservatives in this nation, right? Instead of earning your freedom, instead of standing up for it, you just don't make waves so you don't lose what you have. And that's why we're in the position we're in. Because you're slaves to the comfort. You're slaves to the thought of freedom. You're slave to the fear of being canceled. And you won't go out of your way. And listen, I'll say it not just conservatives. I'll say people who live in the inner city. You may be liberal and black, but you're a slave again and you don't even know it. You're a slave to the fact that, The you don't want to stand together because it'll never make a difference. So that's what you believe in your mind. So you don't do anything. You don't try to get 20 young people together and start teaching them how to covertly spread the belief in the Constitution again, and understanding of true freedom and mentorship and service to the nation, and how that pays back. No, because you don't want to, you don't want to go out of your way. You don't want to get up off your couch. Listen, laziness knows no color. Poverty knows no color. Oppression knows no color. No sexuality, no gender. Once you become lazy, you're lazy. It doesn't matter. That knows no color, gender, race, nothing like that. And we're all slaves. We're all slaves to the thought of getting in trouble or not having our freedom. And in fact, to stand up for freedom and give what you have for freedom is truly free. That's when you make the decision. What I have is because of I've been free enough to get it. But if I don't serve freedom, even what I have could be taken. And if you think it can't be taken, I mean, we're only into March, almost April of 2021, and look at the way things are going, okay? We could talk about Joe Biden all day. Let's just focus on the policies. Gas is out of control, already up 30 cents in the past in the first 2 months of 2021. Social justice stuff flying all over the place. The military is being hampered by doing their jobs because of the transgender issue, the fake going after patriots, as though patriots are, you can talk about, the Navy says you can talk all you want about Black Lives Matter because it's not a political issue, but you can't talk about politics now in the military, and especially in the Navy. You can't discuss any these patriotic movements. Well, I don't know if they realize this. They probably do because they're aligned with them. But Black Lives Matter was started by 3 communist lesbians. Not my description of them. That's the description of themselves. That's not a judgment or me being homophobic. That's how they describe themselves. They're communists and they're lesbians. Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with Black Lives Mattering. It has to do with using Black lives and the anger and the stats of the inner city to make it look like whites are the ones who are bad, so that they can divide, not fix. It has nothing to do with fixing. But people are such a slave to fake news. You're such a slave to I want to be heard. You're such a slave to believing, because you've never known real oppression. You're such a slave to believing the narcissistic. Yeah, I say narcissistic, right? It's the same thing with somebody who's an alcoholic or a drug addict, or somebody who has had a extreme violent conflict or incident in their life, and they can't let it go. They become almost narcissistic in the way that they want to be noticed, that their problem is worse than everybody else's, and they become a slave to that problem. And that's what's occurring. People want to feel oppressed. They feel like it's a badge of of courage that they've been through. It's like people all last year were saying, "Oh, I know I had COVID." I'm like, "When did you get it?" "Oh, I had it in December or January." Folks, you had the flu. If you think you had COVID in December of 2019 or January 2020, you had the flu. Now, I had COVID. It's nothing I'm proud of, and I would rather have not had it, to be honest with you. But people feel as though that, like, they got to brag about the fact, I definitely had COVID. I say, did you ever have antibody tests? No, but I don't need it. I'm sure I had it. Why would you go bragging because you had COVID? Why? Because you are a narcissist. because you have become somebody who is an attention-seeking whore. That's this nation, full of attention-seeking, narcissistic whores. Whether you're on that's one of that must be one of the greatest commonalities between the left and right that there is. The left wants to be these heroic people for, and go out and do and oppress other people. Everything that they say is happening to them, that's what they do to other people. And on the right, you got a bunch of people who want to go out to rallies, pat themselves on the back, say they love Donald Trump, and then bitch and complain because an election was stolen over the past 4 years, not in November, right, of last year. Nobody waited to do stop the steal, or nobody did stop the steal last year until after an election happened. That's just the craziest thing. I tweeted out yesterday or today saying that it's a very similar thing. Like, I'm turning on the radio now. Everybody's talking about communism. You hear it from everybody in the conservative arena. Communism. Listen, folks, I was screaming communism in 2013 on the radio and TV. I was talking about the Red-Green Alliance back then. That's when it started. I listened to Yuri Bezmenov, and then I started doing my research and found out about the Red-Green Alliance. That's the alliance between communism and Islam, fundamental Islam. Call it radical, whatever you want to call it. When one rises, they both rise. Now, they don't depend on each other necessarily, but history shows that they do cling to each other quite a bit. And I was talking about that. Then I started talking more about communism, less about Islam, because what I started to see was that the true national security threat was communism. But I couldn't get anybody. I got literally not asked to come back on shows because I kept talking about communism. Now you've got radio hosts writing shows about socialism when their producer bitched me out one time because I did a show that it involves a teacher coming on and talking about communism in the Department of Education and Planned Parenthood. And that host goes out and writes a book about socialism with the blessing of the producer. Ridiculous. I turned on the TV the other day, or on the radio, and heard every single host talk about communism, then turned on the television and saw Mark Levin do an incredible opening segment Sunday night about communism. And then he blew the show. I mean, I love Mark Levin's my favorite guy on radio. And a show I was not a fan of because it wasn't true to Mark Levin, I don't think. But this show was, at least the first part of it. And then he had Candace Owens on. Candace Owens, somebody who has ridden a wave because she's a black female, not because of her experience in anything. Every time there's an issue, she somehow clings her color and her gender to that. She hated Trump before, a black female who hates Trump, and then all of a sudden she worshiped Trump, and then she became an oppressed by the left because she's black and she's female, and now communism, and she's oppressed because she's black and a female, and she's doesn't want to go down the road with the other Democrats and who are black, and so that's her thing. It's never analysis about the reality without her little thing added in there. It's always her thing. And you see this across the board. Listen, folks, don't send your money to PACs and nonprofits anymore. Nonprofits, you need to be very careful, because I'll tell you the truth. Most of these nonprofits, and yes, the military ones are the worst, and the ones being ran by veterans are the absolute worst. Where they start these nonprofits, doing it for the troops, special forces, SEALs, and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Personally, themselves, they pocket that much money. And then they live like kings and queens. And then you have these people who run PACs, political action committees. That money that you're sending to them, by law, never has to be used for those candidates that they open those PACs about. Women for America First. I used to stand with them quite a bit because I believed in Amy Kramer and her daughter Kylie. Now, I believe that they're two of the biggest criminals out there. Wouldn't ever have anything to do with Women for America First or anything Amy Kramer does. because she's been living down in Trump Doral off of all the money that these incredible women have been sending into her because they believe her crap. And I say the same thing to all of you. Don't send your money. Be careful who you get involved with and you support, because most of them, it's just a clique. It's a shtick. It's their act. If they were true patriots, they would be busting their rear ends to get the message out of what's happening in this nation. And if you send in a donation, that would be used for that, not to go live in Trump Doral. They have no other jobs but this. Collect the money, pay themselves a ridiculous amount, keep 50% of the money that comes in, and throw something every now and then, like a little bus tour or a rally somewhere. Nothing comes out of those things. Nothing at all. And I didn't know this. I used to help out with tremendously. You want me to speak? Sure, I'll drive down there. I'll do it for free because I believe in your cause. That's what I did for Women for America First. Drove down for free, did these things. Meanwhile, they were staying in the most expensive penthouse suite in the Willard Hotel. In the Willard Hotel, and then when the fight happens, they get all the money back from that fight, and that money went straight into their pockets. They get all the money back for the hotel rooms, comped. I wasn't staying there. I drove down for free to help them out. They didn't donate any money to me. They didn't donate any money to anybody else. That money went in their pockets. And that's the way these people work. Politicians, PACs, super PACs, nonprofits, all of these people, they're working off the fact that they know you are a slave. You're a slave to the fake news. You believe whatever you're told. You're a slave to patriotism. You think, yes, I'm saying that, you're a slave to patriotism, not true patriotism, but the thought of patriotism. You think that if you act and do things a certain way that you can pat yourself on the back and that's good enough. But when it comes to actually doing something worthwhile, you won't do it because you're afraid. You're a slave to fear. Now, I had a whole bunch of different things I was going to talk about today, but I guess the whole thing that I was getting onto here was how ridiculous this has become. It's gotten to a point now where in California, in Oakland, and I think San Francisco as well, that there's a basic income program where they're going to give $500 a month. Remember I was just telling you about the Indian reservations, right? Well, now this is just the inner city. And they're going to give $500 a month to non-white families. Now you can't even be poor and white and expect anything from the government because of the color of your skin. That's how ridiculous this has gotten. It's gotten to the point where they're vilely racist, and it doesn't matter. You have a guy who goes in, who was white, in Atlanta, and shoots up a bunch of Asian massage parlors, which I don't know if anybody's put two and two together. I'm not saying this justifies it, but these are prostitutes, right? And this is where they do, you know, the happy endings, and you can have sex in these places. They're prostitution houses. And I guess you get a massage if you want. This guy went in and shot up a bunch of these places, killed, I think, 10 people. Okay, I think it was 10 people. Heinous act. Terrible act. But all you saw the news reporting is that he was a white guy with a gun, so that they could spin that and go after and then say that, you know, this had to do with Asians, it had to do with a white guy with a gun, when in fact the guy's nutty. He's nutty as a fruitcake. He's crazy. And yes, he used a gun, but he had a history of mental illness, should never have had that gun. And then the reason he targeted Asians was because of, he says, a sex addiction. Not real sure. But it was not the way the media pointed it out. And when they associate that one day with all the other crimes around the nation that have to do with Asians, they're leaving out the part that in many of these places, the Asian community is pretty close to inner city, and they don't get along. The black community and the Asian communities do not get along in some of these places, and that's where the high rise or the high amount of crime against Asians is occurring. The same thing with the Jews in Brooklyn, where all these quote-unquote anti-Semitic acts are happening. It's not so much anti-Semitic. It's that they don't like each other. Black people and the Hasidic Jews in Brooklyn do not get along. But you're not going to hear that. And when I turn the news on and I see the ridiculousness of the stats, the way the Navy is talking about, let's see here, it's Navy's extremism training says it's okay to advocate for BLM at work, but not politically partisan issues. So you can't go talk about Trump. You can't wear a Trump shirt. You can't do something like that, or have a Trump bumper sticker. You'll get in trouble. But not if you want to wear a BLM mask. That's okay. This is how stupid it's gotten in this nation. This has got to be one of the most ridiculous things I've heard, all for the sake of the left's idea of making everything about color, right? NYPD cop killer. He was, let's see, his name is Richard Rivera. In 1981, he killed an off-duty NYPD officer, Robert Walsh, where he shot him in the shoulder and then walked up when he was on the ground and shot him square in the head. He spent 36 years in prison. Somehow got paroled. He's 56, which means he still has a nice long life to live. This guy is now on the advisory group. See, he's on, it's, was formed by Cuomo. So he's on, where's the name of this? He sits on the panel for the Ithaca and Tompkins County as part of the, get this, Reimagining Public Safety Collaborative. And says that he's doing it in holding the memory of Officer Walsh to the highest standard of policing in terms of a protector to the community, somebody who cares for the community. That's what he's saying. He's saying he's doing it so that to show that he's like giving back and holding to the highest standard for the cop that he shot. I mean, the guy should still be in prison. He took a life. He should have gotten the death penalty is what he should have gotten. This just, I read this story on foxnews.com. I don't know if you saw this today. Oklahoma police, they were releasing the identity of the deadly jail hostage suspect where they took a prison guard captive and beat him to an inch of his life and then released him. And guess what? He's the perpetrator's black. The other people that were involved with it are black, but they're not going to say that word. They're not going to say black in the news. The two girls that killed a Pakistani man in that video, I have it on Twitter. It's vicious. They carjacked him. They tased him, and then he was trying to get they were in the front seat. He was trying to get them out, and he had like his feet inside the car, but he was holding onto the door, and they took off and slammed his door into some ballads, which pretty much probably squished him. And then they turned a corner too fast. You can hear the whole thing, and the car flips, horrible crash sound, threw the guy into a metal fence and killed him, the Pakistani guy. The girls, 13 and 15, both black. Later that day, the mayor of D.C., who's black, failed to mention that about anything about this carjacking until another carjacking by 2 more black teenagers happened in the same area. Then she said, it's terrible that these, carjackings are on the rise. We got to do something about it. She didn't mention the death of that other guy. CNN called it an accident, a terrible accident. It was murder. It was plain murder. The girls it had to be high. One girl was more concerned about getting her cell phone out of the car. And here's the other thing about that video that really disturbed me. This has nothing to do with anything I'm talking about, but the National Guard guys, if you watch that video, there's a bunch of National Guard, because they're all still patrolling, quote unquote, that area. They come running up there. They didn't even check on the guy laying on the ground. They just helped the girls out of the car until somebody said, hey, they stole that car. I think they held him there, but nobody, the 15 seconds or 30 seconds that the camera was on there, nobody checked on that guy. And he was still kind of moving. They didn't check on him at all. What is going on in the military? All you can do is just sit there and tell people to stand back and not go over and check on somebody. I mean, what are you learning these days in your training? Horrific. We better hope somebody doesn't try to invade this nation. There's a good chance that they could succeed, quite frankly. I'm not going to lie to you. Besides the special forces and, some of the specialty things like pilots and things, it's just ridiculously bad. Terrible. Central Command, the person whoever runs their Twitter left their computer on and their baby went up and sat on the keyboard or did whatever, and so a tweet went out with this gibberish on there. That would have gotten me fired if I was working for the government back in the day for leaving my computer unlocked. You kidding me? I'd get fired for that. This stuff is going on. It's so ridiculously bad. It's mind-boggling. And it's basically all because in this nation, the conservatives have become a slave to not wanting to get in trouble. They become a slave to, I've got enough comfort, just like, the guys talking about on the Indian reservation. I got enough to make me comfortable. Don't take it away. I don't want to risk it being taken away. One last thing I want to point out here. This SolarWinds hack where DHS and some other groups got hacked. I think it's very interesting because it actually happened during the Trump administration. And it's Russia, Russia, Russia. Yeah, all the time. Anything that has to do with that's bad in this country, somehow it's blamed on Russia. I tell you, I don't believe that Russia's doing all this stuff. I don't believe that they're doing it without coordination with the Democrat Party. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. If I had to look at the obvious subjects, now I'm not saying that Russia doesn't try to do these things. I'm not saying that China doesn't do these things. But it sure is interesting who they target in these things and when they target them and how the Russian footprints are always there. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it at all. I think that's about good. Listen, this is just my first day back. It was the bitch session for being the first day back. But I literally, folks, I can't say nothing. I wanted to send out several tweets saying, but Twitter's not, you can't say something long enough. The fact is, this whole black-white thing, this whole transgender thing, it's gotten to a point where it's just ridiculous. I can't take it seriously anymore. People are not oppressed if they are unwilling to pull themselves up and make something out of their lives. What they get may look like oppression, but it's self-induced oppression. They didn't choose to get out of it. They chose to gangbang. It's not anti-Semitism if the two people that are fighting or somebody's attacking Jewish people in Brooklyn because they hate each other. It's not like the Hasidic Jews. I know a lot of them. It's not like in Brooklyn, like the Hasidic Jews are trying to build some kind of bridge with the black community so they can all be closer and love each other. That ain't happening, folks. Nobody else is willing to talk about this because it's uncomfortable. I know you're uncomfortable right now listening to it. because it's the truth, it's reality. But every day you're told it's not. You're told that white supremacy is on the rise. You're told that this white guy shot up all these different Asian massage clinics because white supremacy and white people with guns are killing everybody that's Asian. It's not true. It's not true. These are lies that you're being told, and so when you actually talk about the truth, it feels uncomfortable. That's the truth. December 18th, 1865 is the date that most people should know, but quite frankly, they don't. It's very important in American history. It's the day that the 13th Amendment was adopted and slavery was officially abolished. But what's interesting is slowly over time, the American citizenry has become slaves to comfort. Most people are afraid to stand up to government. They're afraid to say what is really happening because they're afraid they're going to get canceled. They're afraid they're going to lose their social media. They're afraid their comfort is going to start to deteriorate, so they don't do anything. That's oppression. That's slavery. It has to stop. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace. I'm out of here.